Welcome to Beyond Suffrage. My name is Holly Andrew. I'm the curator of the museums at Union Station.
And I'm Sarah Langston, Head of Special Collections at Weber State University.
Today we're going to be talking about the Equal Rights Amendment and its impacts on Utah. In order to understand the Equal Rights Amendment, we have to start with a definition of citizenship. For the purposes of this video, we're going to define citizenship as the rights and responsibilities between an individual and its state, pertaining to equal access and protection.
So to look at the definition of citizenship, we have to go back to the 14th Amendment that was passed in 1869 after the Civil War. The 14th Amendment granted citizenship to all persons, no matter if they were naturalized or born in this country. Then we had the 15th Amendment, which granted the right to vote, and that right to vote couldn't be denied based on color, race, or former servitude.
The 19th Amendment allowed women the right to vote because they were now defined as citizens of this country.
So the question becomes, why in the 1970s does the ERA movement happen, and why really are we dealing with this 100 years later? So when you look at the Equal Rights Amendment, it actually started back in 1923 with Alice Paul. She was part of the suffragette movement, but she really pushed for a constitutional amendment to be added to the U.S. Constitution, stating that women could not be discriminated against simply because of their sex, that it would make them equal. This amendment was brought up to Congress every year from the 1923 until the 1970s, when it was finally passed in 1972. Immediately after it was passed, 35 states ratified it, but there was a fight for those last 3 states. And that fight is something that still continues today. So by the 1970s and 80s, there was a lot of opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment.
A group known as the Equal Forum, formed by Phil Schlafly, was against the Equal Rights Amendments on the grounds that it would require women to enter the workforce, deny them access to their children, and deny them the support they needed from their husbands.
So locally we had the group Hot Dog, and Hot Dog stood for Humanitarians Opposed to Degrading Our Girls. So one of the local women that was heavily involved with Hot Dog was Patricia Manson. And Patricia went to Layton City Council in the 1970s and asked them to use their influence to get the Equal Rights Amendment voted down in Utah. She stated that the Equal Rights Amendment would cause women to be drafted into military service, would make them equally financially responsible for their families, and also stated that rape would no longer be a crime.
By 1978, the LDS Church came out against the Equal Rights Amendments based on the grounds of that it was an attack against the family, that the 14th Amendment already saw women as equals, and that the amendment itself was too vaguely worded.
So when we look at the opposition, of course we also have to look at the women and the groups that were pro-Equal Rights Amendment. So looking nationally, we look at Shirley Chisholm, and Shirley was the first African-American woman elected to Congress. She was also very vocal in support of the Equal Rights Amendment. She said that the amendment was necessary to eliminate the ambiguities in federal law, and that basically there needed to be no artificial distinction between the sexes. Then we start looking at locally, and even though the church was opposed to the Equal Rights Amendment, there was a group called Mormons for the ERA that was started by Sonia Johnson. And Sonia really used the church's coming out against the ERA as a way to bring and rally women who were Mormon to be pro-ERA. She clashed quite often with Orrin Hatch. And Sonia got herself into a little bit of trouble with the church and ended up being excommunicated. The Mormons for ERA was around until about the mid-1980s when they died down. When we look locally here in Ogden, the group was the ERA Coalition, and this was run by Beverly Daly. And Bev really saw it as her mission in life to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed. And so she would send out petitions, she reminds me a lot of Emily Tanner Richards when I think about it. You know, she was the voice of the Equal Rights Amendment here in Ogden. And she told me that she was just devastated in the 1980s when the amendment didn't pass. And she says, you know, it is her one goal in life to see that pass before she finally passes away. So when we look at these women, we also need to look at the League of Women Voters. And the League of Women Voters here in Ogden started in 1961. And they, as we discussed previously, were heavily involved in documenting racial discrimination. But also during the 1970s, they were sort of on the forefront of the Equal Rights Amendment. They were the ones out working, sending petitions, protesting at Temple Square, doing what they could to try and get this amendment passed.
By responding creatively to discrimination, stereotypes, and conflicting values, Northern Utah women have continued to break down social and political barriers to find their voice today.
And when I think of women who have broken barriers, I think of Olene Walker. Olene was born and raised in Weber County, and she became the first female governor of Utah. During her time as governor, she really worked to advocate for education, the homeless. She even redid workforce services. She started the CHIP program, which provided insurance to children of low-income families. She also really advocated for women. She wanted to see women continue to run for office and be part of the political process. One of the other women that really stands out to me is Ann Milner. Ann started off as a professor at Weber State University, but then ended up becoming the first female president of a university in the state of Utah, which was an amazing feat at that time. She ended up serving for 10 years and really worked to expand the campus and expand the student body as well. She sees that she paved the way for opportunities for other women to advance their career in education.
Northern Utah has always been replete with remarkable women as community leaders, activists, inventors, entertainers, mothers, daughters, partners. Northern Utah women constantly serve on the front lines and serve their local and national communities.
So we invite you to explore these women and many others on our website, beyondsuffrage.org.